Welcome to r/slash Nuclearrevenge, where a grandma almost murders an abusive a-hole. Our next Reddit post is from Silver Rose. This all happened in 1985, so this was before security cameras were a household thing. Plus, this happened in bumfuck Georgia. My grandmother, Clara, told me that when my mom, Angela, turned 19, she got engaged to a man named Dick, which is his actual name, by the way. Grandma Clara noticed that Dick was very controlling. Like, my mom couldn't use a phone, the landline, and he forbid her from going to family events. Grandma Clara's final straw was when my mom called her in the middle of the night crying, saying she couldn't do it anymore, and that he had been beating her. By this point, they had been together for almost 2 years and had my older brother. Grandma Clara told my mom to go to my great-grandfather's house and stay there, but to tell Dick that she was actually going to Grandma Clara's house. My mom did as she was asked, and Grandma Clara waited for him. Dick eventually came in the middle of the night, yelling that Angela needed to come home and stopped acting like a child. Grandma Clara told Dick that she was inside the house. He went in, and Grandma Clara came in behind him and hit him over the head with a bat that she had set beside the inside of the door. Dick fell to the floor, and Clara hit him several times in the legs and arms, breaking one of his arms and fracturing a rib. When she was done, she told him to never come near her daughter, or he would be in a ditch next. He never came back. Pretty sure he burned my mom's stuff, but she didn't care. Our next Reddit post is from Throwaway Lifts. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and I beat the stuffing out of my 23-year-old sister for sexually harassing my boyfriend, who's 25. I can finally talk about this because all the legal proceedings have been dealt with. So I've been dating my boyfriend, Mark, for about 5 years. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me. He's kind, smart, understanding, and absolutely beautiful. When we started dating, he was a bit closed off and was afraid to initiate any form of intimacy. I at first thought that it was because I was his first relationship and maybe he was nervous. 6 months into us dating, he tells me that between the ages of 5 and 12, he was sexually assaulted and R-worded by his mother. His father left when he was around 4. It messed him up in the head for a while. And when it got out that his mother was arrested, he and his 2 older sisters were put in the custody of their grandparents, who they lived with ever since. He was placed in intensive therapy and still goes to this day. He's come a long way and he's healed a lot, but he still has some days where he gets really depressed and cries. Part of his therapy was exercising, so about 2 years ago, he and I started doing some bodybuilding workouts. I toned up a lot, put 20 extra pounds of muscle on, and he toned up a bit. Because we've been dating for so long and we have marriage in mind, he told my family about the abuse, and they welcomed him with love and support. Now for my sister, Sally. I've suspected that Sally has a bit of a crush on my boyfriend. She'll flirt sometimes here and there, but he never reciprocated and usually ignored her. I've talked to her about it many times, but she didn't listen. To make a long story short, I had gone out one Saturday afternoon with some friends to get some drinks, and I left Mark behind because he didn't feel like going. My sister had texted me prior to ask if she could borrow a few things from me. I said sure and to get it whenever. She came over when I was out, unknowingly. When I came home, I found my boyfriend on the ground crying his eyes out and my sister trying to calm him down. He was having a panic attack. It's never safe to touch him when he has an episode because he may act out violently due to his headspace. Her hands were all over him and he was trying to push her away. Her shirt was also on the ground and she was only in her bra. I tore my sister away from him and asked what the F she was doing. She said that she was trying on a sweatshirt she was borrowing from me when he walked in on her, freaked out, and went into an episode. However, Mark, through his tears, said that she tried to touch him. I asked my sister if this was true, and she said no, but Mark again said that she tried to touch him. We have cameras in the house, so I pointed that out to my sister. Her face went white, and I don't know what came over me, but I saw red. I can't remember much because I was so angry, but I beat the stuffing out of her. I can't even remember if I was the one who called 911 or her through her beat-up state. I do kind of remember snapping out of it because Mark was still going through his episode. It's all a haze. I broke my sister's nose, gave her a black eye, and bruised her ribs. She was in the hospital for a few days. Then OP posted an update. To be clear, my sister didn't actually R-word Mark, but she did try to coerce him into sexual activities. Then OP describes what happened after watching the security footage. Mark said that when he answered the door, she told him that she was there to get my camera and sweatshirt. He said okay and let her in. He was watching TV, so he went back to his show while Sally walked to our room. She called out to him for help, and the camera showed Mark getting up to help her. I don't remember how long they were in there, but the tape showed Mark rush out of the room while holding his hands out as if trying to stop an attacker. My sister then emerged half naked while holding onto her shirt. Mark backed up into the kitchen, still holding his hand out as she advanced towards him. Mark said that he was telling her to put on her shirt and leave, but she kept saying something along the lines of, "Hey, it's okay. I just need some help, that's all. And you're such a nice guy. Just help me out a little." At that point, I think that Mark was falling into a panic attack because he started shaking. My sister took that opportunity to hug him. She said she did it to try to calm him down, but the tape showed her kind of grinding up on him. He pushed her away and fell to the ground crying and screaming. My sister then got down beside him and was trying to run her fingers through his hair. Her other hand was also moving up towards his crotch. I remember from the tape seeing Mark flinch backwards and try to push her away. She just kept moving closer to him. A few minutes later is when I got home and beat her to within an inch of her life. I can't remember who called the police, but the police showed up and my sister limped to the door while I was trying to calm down Mark. I kinda remember them asking questions and trying to help Mark calm down. They thought that Mark was going into shock, so they put a blanket over him and the paramedics came. My sister was quickly evaluated and then brought to the hospital. I remember my parents showing up and asking what happened. I told them everything. My mom stayed with Mark and I while my dad drove to the hospital to see my sister. Mark and I pressed charges on my sister, emotional trauma and sexual battery, a class A1 felony where I'm from. My sister tried to sue me, but it fell through. With the evidence we had, my sister was sentenced to 60 days of incarceration with a bond of $5,000, which no one paid. She also has to serve 200 hours of community service, and her name was added to the sex offender registry. She can appeal to the courts to have it removed after 10 years. She was also placed under a restraining order. On top of that, my sister owes us $25,000. I got a small slap on the wrist, and I have to do 50 hours of community service. Nothing too bad. My sister was cut off from the entire family and still is. Mark regressed tremendously, to the point that he couldn't sleep in the same bed as me for months. He was required to go into even more expensive therapy. He's come quite a ways, but nowhere near like he was before it happened. It'll take a long time for him to heal. I consider myself bisexual, but I lean more towards men, while Mark is 100% gay. He finds the female body disturbing, to the point that we had to skip over full female nudity scenes in movies. My sister knew about this. When I asked her why she would do this, she said she thought that she could change his mind. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm also not sorry. Our next Reddit post is from Effective Fix. For the sake of this story, we'll call my grandparents' friend William. Now, my grandparents knew William from way back. My grandmother knew him from school, and my grandmother met him when he was marrying my grandmother. Anyways, in the 60s, Grandma was a manager at the 7-Eleven. William led a crew that went there every day. It was the only gas station in a 30-minute radius, so everyone knew everyone in that sleepy coastal town kind of way. Now, one day, William was doing a job down on the waterfront and slipped, fell, and broke his back. While he was healing from the operation and broke as a joke, my grandma would always make sure to send William something to eat that she paid for out of her own pocket. The crew would take back the food to William when they came in to grab their snacks and gas up. My grandma did this because she knew that he was the type of man who would simply skip the meal to save money for his own family. My grandpa also took William to several doctor's appointments since William couldn't drive for a while, and his tiny little wife couldn't wrangle William into a car by herself. William never forgot that. 20 years later, when William sold off his now very successful business and was a millionaire about 20 times over, he promptly told 90% of the world to go to hell. but he kept those who had always been there for him close. Meanwhile, he never moved from the house that he had had since before he was rich. His only evidence of his wealth were trips with his wife to see the world and buying up quite a few acres of the forested land around him. If you weren't William's friend, you'd take him for every other blue-collar worker in town. There was absolutely nothing obvious to show that he was worth tens of millions of dollars. After his wife died in the 90s, William decided to take up a new hobby. Since he lived outside of the city limits, he set up a sawmill and woodworking shop. He got all the proper permits and everything. The saws were in a big old enclosed building in the middle of all that land, so in all honesty, no harm, no foul, right? Wrong. The family that owned the forest behind William's land had just sold it to developers. Thus, the new luxury gated neighborhood, the first in the area, was born. Enter a plethora of Chad and Karens, who were mostly from up north and had moved down south to take advantage of the better weather and the nearby beach. It didn't take long before they decided to take offense to William's little business venture on the other side of the 10-foot wall of their neighborhood because it didn't fit with the image of their community. You know, the community that William was decidedly not a part of. So they sued him. They didn't even try to start a dialogue with him. They just up and sued him. William was livid. He was your typical coastal redneck, and he'd be damned if those damn Yankees told him what to do on his own property. Property that was not within city limits, nor within the HOA. William countered with professional noise studies that showed that some of the kids in that neighborhood drove vehicles that made more ambient noise than his little operation. Nope, the people in the neighborhood simply threw more money at the lawyers to continue with the lawsuit. Essentially, their plan was to bleed him dry. Their lawyers, who were not locals, actually told William's lawyer that he should probably advise his client to close the shop so that he wouldn't end up bankrupt due to the resources being thrown at him from the homeowners. Due to the relatively modest surroundings of William's home, the neighbors nor their lawyers had any idea that this man was actually richer than just about all of them put together. All they saw was an older dude who drove up a beat-up 80s model truck and wore Dickies jeans and work shirts that lived in what appeared to be a relatively modest home, especially compared to their McMansions. When William's lawyer told him about that conversation, William lost his effing mind. I clearly remember him screeching into my parents' driveway in that old work truck, cussing up a storm and ranting and raving before he even got into the house. He came to our house, why? Because my grandmother, bless her heart, was known as one of the most giving people in the world. Unless you pissed her off. If you hurt her or someone she cared for, she became one of the most vindictive a-holes that could be found in that town. I'm not kidding when I say that her ability for revenge served cold was legendary amongst the locals. So William came to my grandma for a dose of her deviousness. Us kids weren't allowed inside during that conversation. But after William left later that day, I heard the adults talking about how he proceeded to hire quite a few private investigators to see if there would be any dirt to dig up on them. And by them, I mean the dozens of homeowners in that neighborhood who were part of the lawsuit. Lo and behold, there was apparently copious amounts of dirts to be had. I still remember him positively crowing about it to my grandparents one fine summer day months later. That 60-something-year-old man was as gleeful as the proverbial kid on Christmas morning. Why? Because after he learned what his little private army dug up, he started making phone calls to various acquaintances in high places. The ensuing fallout meant that the lawsuit was dropped. There was quite a list of misdeeds that were discovered, but the ones that I heard the adults talk about that stick out are as follows. There were more than a handful of individuals who owed back child support. William very helpfully had his investigators provide the mother's updated address and employment information so they could pursue that child support and garnishment if they wanted to. On top of that, the IRS became very interested in several of those people, as well as various other neighbors. Finally, one household ended up in prison because the investigators realized they were drug dealers. The pictures of their transactions taken by the private investigators were helpfully handed over to the sheriff's department. Drugs are bad, kids. Moral of the story, never piss off a rich redneck. That was r/Nuclearrevenge, and if you like this content, check out my podcast where I publish the exact same episodes. Also, hit that subscribe button because I put out new Reddit videos every single day.